5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines start. Lift off of Acerra. Engine club mission. All up flight facility. Engines at 100%. Attitude nominal.
If you're just joining me, my special guest today is Carol Craig. She is the CEO and founder of Craig Technologies and Sidus Space. She's a space CEO, and I've known Craig.
It'll happen a lot.
I've known Carol for a long time. I didn't know her really well, but we went to the same college, and she's a childhood friend of my wife's. They were in flag together. My wife's like, boy, Carol was a year older than me, and she taught me flag. I played second fiddle to her in the orchestra, and so there's a connection here. And so you're a Galesburg gal, and where we are, and you have quite the life, a life full of firsts, I have to say, and interesting firsts that Hollywood has mentioned, not you particularly, but interesting firsts, like first woman, first class of Navy aviators to be allowed to fly combat or to be trained to fly combat, and first you went into aviation and engineering, aerospace engineering, or mechanical engineering.
It was actually software engineering.
Software engineering. There you go.
Electrical.
And so let's talk about that. So first, we'll start with this. What kind of girl were you? I mean, because you're obviously in a very STEM career, being a CEO of an aviation company, being a pilot in the Navy. But what kind of girl would you say you were that maybe you felt different than other girls or not?
Yeah. So, well, actually, I'll correct. So I was a naval flight officer, and we'll talk about a little bit how that differs from pilot, but there's still, some pilot piece of it that goes along with it. But so I was a tomboy. There's a picture. My best friend, Lana, actually from high school and, middle school, still lives in Galesburg. And there's a picture of the two of us. And I definitely look like a dude. I was a tomboy. I've got the cutoff sleeve. I just no makeup. That's who I was. I was definitely not the girly girl. And that only happened maybe about 3 years ago, probably. So that was kind of who I was. And I think I always was the kind that, I wanted to do everything. And my mother would say that, she always encouraged me and, you can do whatever you want. I'm like, okay, let's see what we can. So that's why orchestra, track, math club, anything I could do, I wanted to be a part of it. But I definitely was more the tomboyish girl out there when I was younger.
Yeah, and I remember you, Knox. I thought of you as a jock. I remember you played in sports, and jocks at Knox stuck out because you looked healthy. So there's the healthy one. So
wait, I have to interrupt on that one. I got to tell you real quick when it came to college though, and I have to say this because my mother or Lana or Kathy, all these people that knew me at Knox might be listening. You talk about healthy. I wasn't healthy. I actually for lunch would go to the cafeteria and I would pick out all the marshmallows from the Lucky Charms, and that's what I would eat for lunch. And I actually got in trouble by the ladies that worked in the cafeteria, and they even told my mother that, I'm in college, and they told my mother that I was taking all the Lucky Charms out of the marshmallows out of Lucky Charms and then throwing away the Lucky Charms. So anyway, yes, maybe it looked like we were healthy, but far from it.
You liked your sugar.
I still do.
Man. So yeah. So you're a tomboy, and you go to college, and you get into Knox College, which is a liberal arts college, but you decide to go with a 3-2 plan so you can go to study engineering after your liberal arts experience. So so what was that like? So was it U of I you went?
Yeah, University of Illinois. Absolutely. Yeah. So I actually had got accepted into University of Illinois out of high school, and I accepted, yes, I'm going to go. And then I panicked. I was that homesick type of thing, like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for this. So I transferred to, or didn't even transfer. So then I went with Knox instead. And U of I think still thought I was attending like for the entire first semester of my freshman year. So I went to Knox, and after about 2 years or so, I realized how small Knox was. I'm still in Galesburg, and I think I'm not sure this is for me. I want to transfer maybe. And that's when I discovered the 3-2 engineering program. And that's something that Knox offers. I think this is perfect. In 5 years, I'm going to get 2 degrees. I'm going to get my computer science degree from Knox, and then I can get an engineering degree from University of Illinois. So I ended up transferring it, and it was good. The only bummer that I really kind of felt was the fact that I only did 3 years of track at Knox, because I actually really enjoyed the sports. I was doing pretty well there. So that was the one drawback, but it was good. And I think for me, it was the perfect timing, because had I gone, I mean, I was lucky I passed anyway with the engineering degree and my grades I had at U of I, but had I gone straight out of high school, I don't think I would have actually succeeded. I think I needed those 3 years of maybe settling down a little bit, the liberal arts feel, and then being a little bit older when I went to U of I to get my degree.
Yeah, there's a question about when I went to Knox, when you went to Knox, Knox was pretty much protective about liberal arts being not a vocational kind of career, track. That it was about teaching children how to think, you know, to be exposed to great books, right? And you, there's something about, I know a lot of engineering majors who go straight into engineering, and they tend to be a type. You're not that type, it seems like. Do you ever notice that, like, that your exposure to liberal arts and to be talking and arguing about great books and other subjects besides math and STEM helped you and rounded you, or do you feel like those guys that did straight engineering bury you? Like, do you see any difference at all?
I do see a difference. Now, I'm not so sure. I'm not that smart, so I'm not that super smart engineer. So maybe it wouldn't have mattered. But there's no question that liberal arts combined with the engineering is kind of like that left brain, right brain. I'm also a musician, and you know, like your wife. I mean, I already have that kind of piece of the left brain, right brain, but it was that liberal arts that rounded it. So I can write fairly well. So as far as an engineer goes, you know, I can do documentation. A lot of that came from Knox. You know, I do think differently. I think a little more abstract, out of the box, but I also think, you know, I break it apart, problem solving type of thought process like an engineer would. So I think that absolutely that changed me. And I've also seen over the years, even the last, you know, say 5 years or so, more colleges are creating these programs that combine kind of that liberal arts business thought process with the hardcore engineering, because they realize that's really what you need. You need an engineer that can kind of think in more of a systems engineering mindset. So that sounds like I'm teaching, sorry.
Right, and you've probed the idea here already that you were a tomboy, so you might have a developed masculine side, maybe, but you don't seem to take kindly to saying no to yourself. Like you do jump into things, and you don't second guess yourself. It seems like, because you go into engineering, which was probably more male dominated than it is now, but and then you got the Knox bug of being a service person, so you did join the government after college, and you were in the general service as a computer scientist working for the government. So what in the world drew you to join the Navy after that, after having a job as a civilian in the government, and then you say, I want to go and do the officer and a gentleman school, and just go cold turkey right into basic training to be an officer in the Navy? What the world drew you to that?
What possessed me to do that?
Yeah.
Well, my job that you mentioned as a civil service was working at the Naval Air Warfare Center in Indianapolis, and I was the software engineer, and part of it was actually briefing the pilots and the naval flight officers on the changes that we're making to their cockpit systems and things like that. So I got to know a number of aviators, you know, saw what they were doing, saw that they got to wear their pajamas to work every day, those flight suits and things. And again, as you've seen and you allude to, I've got this, I want to do this now, and this looks really cool, and I want to try everything. And so I started thinking about the military again, which I had always had a little bit of an interest in it. And I just thought, you know what, this is cool. They can do it. I can. And so I just applied. That was really all it was. I don't think that I really was serious about it. I think it was just like, well, let's go. Let's see if I can get in. And I applied and I got in. And so then it's like, oh crap, now what? Because for my age, I was doing pretty well, you know, with salary wise, working for GS, for the government as a GS. And, you know, to change over to military meant I was going to go down to like enlisted pay. You know, there's all this kind of, you know, things that were going to happen. And so at one point I actually said no. And I was married. I had a practice marriage, very short, but I was married. So it was one of those things of like, okay, am I really going to do this? And I decided, no, I'm not. So I went home. Actually, I went home and talked about it when I got in. And so my husband at the time was like, no, you shouldn't do this. He didn't want me to do it. So I went back to my drill instructor and said, nah, I'm not going to do it. And the guy looked at me and he said, you're an idiot if you don't take this. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, really. So then I went back home, and I wasn't really happy in that marriage anyway. I think we'd only been married like 6 months or a year or something. So it wasn't real hard to say, okay, I'm going to do this anyway. So I went ahead and accepted it. And like you mentioned, you know, first at the time, women could not fly combat. And it wasn't until October of '93 when women were allowed, when they were eligible to fly combat. You know, I didn't actually fly combat, but I was eligible to fly now aircraft that were specific to combat. So anyway, that all kind of happened.
How early a class were you? I mean, how many women had gone through the program?
So just a few. One thing that they did is they took women who had already been out flying in non-combat aircraft and then put them through, they had the ability to fly combat. So there were several women ahead of me, but as far as like new aviators and naval flight officers, I went through AOCS in January of 93, got not wings were later, but graduated from AOCS in May, and in October of 93, women were now eligible to fly in combat. So that kind of pushed me in a different track. So I could, when I was going through the rest of flight school and all the process that you go through, I'm able to now look at, potential to fly different aircraft, whether it was the jets or P3s or helicopters or whatever. It meant that now I had a larger option from aircraft. It also meant I had to go through SEER school, which is the whole POW training thing that they have out there. So, so again, it was one of the very first that was women eligible to fly combat.
Right. And you got a stint in Hawaii, which was nice, flying a P3. And I'm really familiar with the P3. It's a big, like a C-130 kind of plane. It's a big prop job,
Yep.
cargo-y looking plane. But they use those to drop like the submarine buoys, right, in the water.
Yep, exactly.
And,
Yeah, that was out of Hawaii. Yeah, and it's interesting.
Nice.
Nobody wanted to go to Hawaii. I was single at the time because I had actually already asked my first husband for a divorce prior to that. And so I was single, and I'm like, it's Hawaii. How hard can it be? And why would no one want to go? Of course, the school systems were questionable. You're really far away from home. That was one of the reasons. So I ended up going out there. And then that was another first. I was the first female aviator, pilot or NFO, to show up at my squadron. And it was VP 47. And so it was out there in Hawaii, and it was great. I mean, I loved it. It was actually pretty cool.
And you basically just flew out, and would you drop these devices in the water? Is that basically what you were doing?
Right, exactly. So again, as a naval, that's the distinction between naval flight officer and a pilot. So I was a naval flight officer, which in the old days you were purely backseat, just do whether you're doing radar or you're dropping the sonobuoys or whatever aircraft it might be. But also, when I went through at the time, they being the Navy, had just decided that they wanted backseaters to learn to fly front seat. So it was another kind of a first, and it was something I wasn't anticipating. So when I finally went through flight school, I had to learn to fly front seat, and to be honest, I'm afraid to fly. So that was kind of a whole issue there. But anyway, so what I did in the actual P3 was more of the navigation, where to drop the sonobuoys. So we would go up and we'd be on what they call on station, and you would be on station for like 10 hours. I mean, it was a long time, and just kind of doing your circle, tracking, looking for submarines, or you might be tracking ships, rigging ships, things like that. And so not a real sexy aircraft, but still a cool opportunity. And to compound things, though, I actually have motion sickness, so I puked all the time in the P3 as well. So that was how I punctuated. I'd sit there and navigate, do what I'm supposed to do, and then I'd throw up in a bag, go to the back, get rid of it, come back up, do some more of my stuff, throw up in a bag, go back up. It never stopped me from well, like you said, I don't like being told no. So I refuse to let it stop me from doing what I'm supposed to do. So.
Right. So how were you treated by fellow officers? Was it a real male culture, and they didn't take kindly to seeing you, or did it surprise you any way, one way or the other?
No, it was actually pretty good. I mean, I think most of them were just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever, it's cool. And I do think, I remember in flight school, maybe a little preferential treatment, and this is another quick story that, and in preferential, I don't think they did it on purpose, but I was flying front seat, and we were coming around in the pattern, and it was time to drop the gear. I dropped the gear. I dropped it too soon, and the pilot in front of me or behind me is like, "Oh, no, you're not supposed to." And so I put it back really quickly. Well, that was cycling the gear. It was not good. You don't drop the gear and then slam it back up. It's like, oh crap. So he's like, okay, we got to go around the tower just to make sure that the gear isn't stuck down and that kind of thing. Went around, it was fine. We landed, and then we did our debrief. And in reality, he should have given me what they call a down, like you did not pass that particular flight kind of a thing, but he didn't. And so that's one of the instances where I think maybe he was a little, preferential, maybe because I'm a woman, or maybe because I was sitting there going, oh dude, I screwed up. You need to fail me on this flight. And he's like, no, it was, you learned, you did this, whatever. So that's about the only instance. I mean, my drill instructor hated me in AOCS. I will say that. He was so mad that he had women in his classes. And so that just kind of pushed me more of, I'm going to succeed. You're not going to be able to kill me. I'm going to make it through this.
So AOCS is different than OCS, and it's the same one. If you're familiar with the movie Officer and a Gentleman, that was AOCS. So so you knew the movie, right? So was it anything like what they show in the film?
A lot of it was, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's more drama well, actually, there was a lot of drama even in going through AOCS, to be quite honest, but it was very similar. Different location. We were down in Pensacola, Florida. That one was filmed. It was up in like Seattle or something. So
the Northwest, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was close. I mean, you had the drill instructor who yelled at you. I mean, legitimately always yelling at you constantly. You're sleep deprived, and but it was cool. I was in the best shape of my life, and I was older. I was 27, and you had to get your wings by the time you were 27. So, and one of the guys was like 20. So it was a different mentality for me. I'd already worked, and they gave different nicknames, and one of my nicknames was summer camp, because they're like, you act like this is no big deal, and your parents are going to come pick you up when it's all over, like at summer camp. I'm like, well, actually, my parents are going to come pick me up, because by then I had actually divorced my husband in the middle of AOCS. I'm like, and he had taken my car. So I'm like, yeah, they kind of are going to come pick me up, because otherwise, how am I going to get home? But yeah, to me, it was no big deal. So again, it was like that, but I looked at it through a different lens than a lot of the others did. So
I could see. That's awesome. They called you summer camp. Those guys have a way of just doing it. They drill it right home, don't they? They just nail the nicknames.
And I was also sea lawyer.
God.
That was another one. Sea lawyer. Sea lawyer is someone who's got an answer for everything. And I'm like, well, but I do. I'm like older than you guys. I've done this before. So when we talk about the male female thing, yeah, I don't know that I was well liked in my class. Yeah. A couple guys I was, but not many.
Well, most of them, they were all college graduates, probably STEM types, right? But you had a little bit more under your belt because you'd worked for the government, computer science, in dealing with avionics, right? So you had a little bit.
Yeah, and some of them weren't. You could get a music degree and still get into AOCS. I mean, there were a lot of aviators that very broad. But again, I'd been there, done that, and I was kind of like, you're not going to kill me. What's the worst that can happen? So. That's an annoying attitude. Yeah.
Did you think being an athlete helped get through that?
Yeah. Oh no, there's no question. Absolutely. Yeah. And I was really adamant that I wanted to meet the men's standards when we did all the requirements. You did.
Oh really?
Oh yeah. I was like
even upper body stuff.
Yeah, and I did.
Okay.
And I did. That was a big deal to me. I wasn't going to be the best, but I was not going to come in at the women's standards. I was going to come at the men's standards. The number of push-ups, the time on the obstacle course, all that kind of stuff.
Did they do pull-ups at that time?
I don't even know anymore. I think so. I think
those are hard.
But it wasn't. Yeah, even men have a hard time doing it, so I don't think it was like massive.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're flying in Hawaii and you go to Sears training. So your movie, we talked about this before. I mean, there's 3 movies your life reminds me of, because teaching Top Gun pilots or pilots, aviators, Navy aviators, about the computer systems in their cockpit was Kelly McGillis's job in Top Gun.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, she's an instructor. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you kind of did so you've kind of the Hollywood's kind of followed your life a little bit, and then you go to Sears training, and you're not like GI Jane. You didn't become a SEAL, but Sears training is pretty tough because they teach you about survival, right? After you're ejected from your plane or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I always messed up what it stands for. It's survival, evade, reconnaissance. Escape, resist, and escape. I don't know. I should know what the answer. Something.
So even if you are captured, they teach you about what to do when you're captured.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And so not many women had gone through that. I got winged in August of '94. I think, am I messing this up? And then a little bit later, I went through SEER school. So just a few women had been going through SEER school. When I went through my group, there was one enlisted girl and then myself, the only female officer in our group that was going through. So it was interesting. It wasn't a bad deal because part of your training is you have to go out and you do your survival kind of a thing. And so it gets super cold at night. And I had plenty of volunteers to snuggle, to keep body warmth going, which my husband I was dating my now husband at the time. He had no problem with that because he actually knew some of the guys going through. But so yeah, it was definitely unique. It was a unique situation to do that. And even I think the trainers, instructors for SEER school were still getting used to having women go through that program. We're talking 25 years ago now, right? So,
but I would think the instructors. I'm thinking of GI Jane's my only analogy of this, but I would think the instructors would be under a microscope, right?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I can't even think back then how it was. I think that they just probably weren't used to it. And
Yeah.
I think they did well. I don't feel like I was ever, singled out. Well, I was singled out as a female, but you needed to do that, right? It's part of their job is to say, hey, you're going to have female aviators out there and you get shot down. And, the enemy may leverage the fact that she's a woman against you and you can't give in to certain things. So yeah, that was kind of how it was fun. I don't know. It was interesting. Again, I was in great shape, so I didn't mind. I'd maybe go through it again just to lose weight. But I don't know.
Right. And you did get injured during that training, right?
I did. I was stupid. Yeah, I actually was getting mad. And again, I have all these stories, but my partner, when we were evading from, once we were dropped into, we're going through truly the exercise of evading the enemy, and then you get captured, and then you go through the other training. They partner you up, and I had a young Marine. He basically left me as soon as they said go. The dude he's like, screw you, I'm out of here. And I'm just, what the heck? So I end up doing this all by myself, and I'm just getting mad, and I'm tired and all that. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care if they capture me. I'm ready to go back in. So I get up and I actually start running, and I tripped and I fell and I twisted my knee, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I end up, okay, I'm gonna keep going through this. That just kind of stopped me from being stupid and getting captured. I ended up doing my thing, and actually I was one of the last ones that got captured. I finally found like a little hill, and I sat amongst a bunch of spider webs and waited until they had to finally call you in, and I ended up going in. And then I found out that the Marine, my partner, he had gotten captured like early, right away. So I was like, you know what, karma's a rough thing. So yeah, so that's
No, him abandoning you, wasn't that like wrong?
I don't know. Maybe it's I love Marines. So I don't think it's because it's Marine.
I know. Was it like a game of hide and go?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not just hide and go seek though. I mean, if you're two fellow servicemen who go down, you don't split up, right?
You would think so, but that, you know what, he was young. I was a female, and yeah, no, and that's it. I swear that's a true story. Totally blew me off a little. I don't know who the guy is. I wish I knew. where he is now. But yeah, but it's what it is.
So now that you're injured, you couldn't graduate SEER school?
So what happened? No. So I went through it. I was fine. So I didn't tell anybody. My knee hurt. That's all it was. My knee hurt. I'm like, oh, I twisted it. What's up with that? Go through SEER school, go through the rest of training. I show up at my squadron, and my knee still bothered me. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have somebody look at it. So I went to a doctor, Air Force doctor out of Hawaii, and said, hey, what's up? And they said, oh, this is, you're built wrong. We can fix that. We'll do the surgery, patellar realignment. Like, okay. So we did the surgery, and it actually made it worse. And at that point, I really couldn't run. And so it's kind of like, well, and you got to be fit. You got to be able to do everything you're supposed to be able to fly. And I was kind of like, I joined the Navy to be in an aircraft, to be a naval flight officer, to do all this. And if I can't, well, that's not really what I want to do. And by that time, anyway, the doctors were looking at me and they're like, yeah, you're not going to be able to do this. So that's when they, had me out on a disability, service disabled veteran on disability.
So you're a woman in her early 30s now.
Yeah.
You're a disabled naval aviator, and you're looking at your options. And so what do?
Well, by then I'd met my super hot F-18 husband, I was
going to ask you about it. Was he a Marine?
Nah, he's Navy. Naval Academy. Navy. He was a Marine. Naval Academy. Yeah.
Naval Academy, and he's flying F-18s, and so he knew like some of the guys in SARS. So you found your new guy is definitely military, Top Gun kind of type. And so what do you do then? You're the naval wife. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, and so I got out of the Navy because of that, and I moved to where he was, which was in California, and I actually got a GS job again. And went to work for the weapons school that was out there for the F-14, F-18 guys in Lemoore, California. So I'm back to being a GS, and doing that for a while. I taught at colleges, just kind of, doing whatever I can. Navy wife, following my husband around, which is completely cool. He keeps getting transferred, so then I got to find another job, and I ended up I decided not to do the GS thing anymore, and just look at, what can I find an engineering job, which I couldn't. I was writing COBOL code, which was a little frustrating for an engineer, that kind of like the more, and used to design cockpit systems. That's a little sexier than COBOL code. So I sort of just followed him around. And that's kind of what led me to the track of starting my own business.
Okay, let's talk about that. So did you just decide one day, I think I could do an engineering company?
No.
Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, not at all. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut. No, what happened was that I was working at doing COBOL at a job in Jacksonville. My husband was now stationed out of Cecil Field, and the gentleman I worked with just kind of said, you know what, you should just incorporate just in case. And I don't know if the conversation was because John might get transferred again, and what's going to happen. He's like, you should just incorporate. Steve Wood, I remember his name, and still friends on LinkedIn and stuff, but. So I said, okay, cool. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I'll just go up. And so I Google, incorporation agents and incorporations.com. I'm like, all right. So I created this company. I mean, that was it. And I was still working for this other company and, MCI or CSX, one of those in Jacksonville, and didn't think anything more of it until my husband got transferred. They closed down Cecil Field and he got transferred up to Virginia Beach. And I'm like, okay, once again, I'm out of a job. What am I going to do? And I said, well,
But you're a company of one, essentially. Craig Technologies.
I just incorporated. I didn't have any, I hadn't done anything. So I get up to Virginia Beach, and that's when I kind of was like, okay, maybe I need to see if this will work. And through some connections, even through the Navy, a friend of mine who worked for a company, she's like, hey, I'll connect you with so-and-so and let's stuff. And I ended up getting my first consulting gig with a company called Acerra Corporation, who is it's a healthcare company. And I was doing COBOL. It wasn't really, I was reverse engineering, COBOL code because they wanted to switch over to like a SQL based kind of thing. And that's what I did. But, back then I think I was making like $150 an hour and I could work as many hours as I wanted. I'm like, this is brilliant. So I just kind of went with that. It was Craig Technical Consulting, Inc., which eventually I did a doing business as to Craig Technologies, because Craig Consulting, Inc. is really hard to say when you've had too much coffee. So I ended up just kind of doing the consulting thing. So it was just the one woman show, and the work started. There was more and more work. And again, I could work 100 hours a week if I wanted. I had no kids yet. And so I could do as much as I wanted. And there was just more and more work. And that's also where I started the transition into hiring more people, turning into a real company and things like that.
More people doing consulting for COBOL.
Yeah, yes. Well, and what it was, so the COBOL code, it was in existence, and they were using a tool by a company called Taurus, and it was a scripting tool. Mm-hmm. So I was writing these scripts, while we were converting the business rules. And so I actually had a couple friends Navy wives who were interested in finding something to do, because that was the worst thing as a Navy wife. You've got degrees, you're smart, you can do all these great things, and you're following your husbands around. They transfer every 3 years, or maybe sometimes even less. So a lot of smart Navy wives who still work for me today, actually, which is awesome. And I know a couple are listening and they know I love them. But I said, hey, I can teach you to write script. I can teach you to do a website. I can teach you to do this stuff. And I'm like, are you sure? And I said, yeah, it's not that hard. It's not rocket science.
Explain the difference between script and code.
It's kind of the same thing. I mean, really, it's just, but it's not as complicated, because it's a closed set of code to do a specific thing. So once you learn it, it's like, okay, yeah, it doesn't really change. And all it was doing, that particular scripting, was pulling data from a legacy system over into a client-based system. So again, it's the same thing. So I just said, it's not rocket science. And then I also hired one of my best friends from Knox College, who she works for me now full-time, had her doing work. And so it started to go, I had people part-time supporting me, and it was like, you know what, I think I can, maybe at one point you have to decide, am I going to make this a real business, like the Pinocchio moment? And I was kind of like, yeah, I think I can do this. And again, by then I had this core group of Navy wives and friends, and who were part-time and who I knew could help me. And so I wasn't 100% doing this alone, which is, amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool that these are it's so organic and natural. It seems like that these are other Navy wives, which is really cool. That's a movie right there, that all these Navy wives get together and kind of start their own company. But how did you end up being this fixture in Cocoa Beach or Space Coast? Space Coast,
Cocoa Beach.
Yeah. How do you have a company down there now, Craig Technologies, and you have Side of Space. Right. How did it turn into facilities and custom engineering and 3D printing and CNC machines? Like, how did it turn into that, where you're actually, how did it
get from here to there?
So
up in Virginia Beach is where I had the consulting company. And in 2001, June 20th, 2001, my son was born. My son was born with a rare genetic disorder. It's called Prader-Willi syndrome. And when that happened, that was one of those kind of life-changing moments of like, okay, what are we going to do? My husband and I, it was, pretty traumatic. He's doing amazing. And that's a whole nother story in itself on how incredible he is. But we kind of have to make a life decision of what are we going to do? Is John going to stay in the military? I had started the business, but it was kind of fledgling still. And what am I going to do with it? And John decided that, and we decided actually that he was going to get out of the military. And I honestly was like, whatever you think's right. And I think he felt like, 16 and a half years he had in with what was the next part of his career meant that he was going to be gone a lot. And he just felt like, that wasn't the track that he wanted to take, especially with the situation with my son. So he decided to get out. And at that point, we just kind of started looking around, like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do when you grow up? Where do you want to live? And we had gone on vacation down here on the Space Coast and thought, this is awesome. And I was always cold growing up in Illinois. And since I got out of college, I was always somewhere warm. I said, you know what, this would be great. Let's look at moving here. So we had bought land and just, kind of investment. Because at that point, I think the only thing of value that we had was a futon couch. So we'd like, okay, we better do some investing. So we bought this piece of land and kept it for a little while. And then John kind of went through, after recognizing he was going to get out, a couple more years or whatever it was, I think, and decided, okay, we're ready to do this. Let's go, let's move. So we had the property down here. We decided to build, and and also, to my husband's credit, he did a lot of research into the school systems. He later became a Brevard County school board member, but because he knew we have a child with disability, 16 months after I had my son, I had my daughter, Jillian. And so these two young kids, and where's the best school system? And it just all kind of came together. This works. On the business side, I was looking at NASA, Harris, DRS, all these great companies, and I'm like, well, maybe I can make something out of this little one-woman show with my friends kind of helping. And at that time, I think I had 10 employees, 5 related to me and 5 part-time, something like, my mother was already working for me, helping me do accounting. So super, super small. So we just said, okay, what the heck, let's do it. And we moved down here not really knowing anybody. And I just kind of said, all right, I guess I'd better make this business thing work, because John had gotten out of the Navy. He decided to go fly for the airlines. So he's making no money, because when you start flying for the airlines, you're usually small commuter airlines. And that's what he was doing. I'm like, oh crap, I've kind of crossed the line of can't go back at this point, and we need to make something happen. And so that's kind of how we transitioned down to the Space Coast. And at that point, really going, okay, I have to turn this thing into a real company to support my family, and let's see what we can do. So I pretty much didn't sleep, I think, for the next 3 years. And that's where I kind of did a transition into more of the government contracting. I mean, I knew I was working toward government contracting by then. I had made that decision up in Virginia Beach. I'm woman-owned, service-disabled veteran. I'm Hispanic, 25%. My grandfather is from Havana, came over from Havana, so that's a minority-owned. So all these kind of set-asides. So I'd already begun that transition. So I just kind of went, full bore once I got down here to Space Coast.
Who are you? So you're still a small fish, though, even though there are set asides. But so who are your big? Who are the big fish that you got the chutzpah to say I want to take a bid on that contract? Who are the big fish that you have to go up against?
Well, so the way I did it is I kind of said I'm going to swim behind you. I'm going to go on your wake a little bit with the big fish. Mm-hmm. So we did a lot of subcontracting, and we still do. So we looked at companies like SAIC, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, any of those large government contractors. I've got the set asides I can support as a subcontractor, just to kind of work our way into, because I didn't know how this worked. I no business degree. I'm an engineer. I'm making the stuff up as I go. So it was really.
So the contracts are landed already.
Some of them, no, some are landed, and you try to say, "Hey, put me on your team." But typically, you have a team. You have to go and you have to sell yourself, even if you've got set asides. I mean, they're like, okay, great. There's 100 companies, 1,000 out there that have set asides. You got to go sell yourself to those larger companies, say, hey, here's what I can offer. Here's who I am. And then you have to get on their team. And then, 18 months, 2 years later, sometimes longer, if their team wins, great, you got the work. If they don't win.
Oh, so Boeing will say to the government, I want this contract to build this radar system, whatever, right? And they're going to say, well, who's going to do your software engineering, right? And if you say, well, we don't have any, the government expects to see the team already in place.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And the team is the one that's bidding on it. And, oh, by the way, the government does have diversity goals, set aside goals. It says, hey, Big Boeing or whoever else, if you're going to bid on this, you need to put 23% or sometimes more than that of your work for small businesses, woman-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned, hub zone. There's all different set asides. So that helps. It gets you maybe just outside the door. You don't even have a seat at the table yet, right? It just gets you, someone's going to answer your knock. And so that's basically how you have to do it. It's just over and over, big, long pipeline, like just one. In my mind, I didn't want to niche. I didn't want to just go after the businesses in my area. I didn't want to just do one thing because I was paranoid. I felt like if you're only doing the one thing and life goes south, what happens, and that's what happened to a lot of companies like in 2008. And again, here with the COVID and, economy and things like that. So we went after a lot of government contracts as support. And then we also bid on prime, and we can bid against other small companies. That's a nice thing until you get to a certain size where you feel confident that you can bid for the larger efforts against the large companies. So there's the different tiers and levels when you do this.
So you said you've always thought you're a little bit ADHD because you just go after the shiny object that you think you could take. And it seems like your business model is let's go for a lot of different opportunities and mitigate our risk, right?
Yeah. I'm actually very risk adverse, which people be like, yeah, right. I really am. Right. I mean, I'm very paranoid. I'm very risk adverse. My glass is always half full, but I'm always going, okay, what happens if it drains out, So I kind of spread my risk. I didn't do like a full-blown shotgun effect. Like I said, I'm not going to do like base support or things that I didn't know anything about. So with an engineering program, computer science, IT, I knew all those things personally. That was my background. So, why not hit everything kind of in a little bit broader aperture and spread it
across. Would you hire? I have a small business too. So would you hire part-time people as projects came online until you fully vested in benefits and everything else and grew your company? Is that how you do it?
Exactly. So it's services based, which is different than what we do on the other company now, which is a little more product based. Services, you bid on contracts, and either you're going to bring in the incumbents, so the people who are already there, you're just going to hire them in, or you're going to hire people for the contract. So it's not like a lot of CapEx intensive capital, expenditures. And so it's exactly what you said. Then you hire the people, you bring them in. I put benefits in place with my company, I think as early, I might have had 10 people, maybe one small contract. And because I understood with some of the disability, how important it is to have medical benefits and that really cover you so that you don't have to worry about that side. Because we were super blessed that with Danny's disability and everything that, we ended up doing with it, that the Navy medicine actually covered it. So that was important for me. So I had the benefits in place. To me, that was easy. You hire people, you treat them right, and the rest is history. So that was the services side of it. That kind of changed when I started to evolve or move into manufacturing and ended up doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah. So, and maybe we're jumping ahead, but the NASA, the space industry is changing a lot. NASA is kind of like changing its mission a little bit because now there's lots of commercial enterprise that's launching their own rockets, and now everything's kind of shifting. But did you come into a situation where there was a giant government building that essentially was looking for someone to take it over?
Yes. Yeah. So again, backing up just a little bit, some of my first contracts were DOD, but also NASA. I think it was in 2008 here in Brevard County that we ended up teaming with a SAIC company and doing some work out at KSC. So that's when we really started getting involved in more of the NASA type of work and getting known in the community, did a lot of volunteering. And that's, you had asked, how did I get to Space Coast, and then how do you get known in Space Coast? And we just got involved in a great place to live. So start growing the number of people that we had here on the services side. And at one point I had the opportunity to partner with a gentleman. He had an idea. He wanted to build some particular product. I'm an engineering company and we want to team up. And he convinced me that I should buy a small manufacturing facility. And that's a whole nother hour story in itself. We ended up parting ways. I was lucky. I kind of did it the smart way. So no liability. I could just tell him, see you later. We're done. And I kept everything else. But now at this point I had a small manufacturing facility, and that was fine because I thought, all right, small manufacturing, we can do prototyping, we can offer that up to our customers with our engineering, and it might work. And around that same time, I think it was in 2012 or so, or 2011, NASA was making this transition. The shuttle program was going away. Last launch, I think, was 2012. They were anticipating, they were trying to think, okay, how are we going to do this? We need to bridge the gap. We need to, do something, they're trying to think out of the box. And they did one of those things was Space Act agreements where they could partner with industry to, really do things differently. That's where the big building came about. There was a request for information related to equipment that was over in this 160,000 square foot facility in Cape Canaveral that was used to refurbish the shuttle every time it came back. This request for information came out, and at that time we had our small manufacturing. One of the gentlemen that worked for me was like, "Hey, we should bid on this. Well, let's see what happens. Be careful what you wish for." I'm like, all right, let's see what happens. So we bid on it, and it wasn't even bidding; it was an RFI. So, and all that it was they had all this equipment, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to take this equipment over. You maintain it for 5 years, and then give it back to us." And so we bid on it. There were three companies that bid on it, and they selected us. It was like, oh crap. Okay, now what? So
you're keeping the seat warm.
Yeah, that's essentially what it was, because nothing else came with it. Like, I didn't even get the ticket into the movie theater to keep the seat warm. It's like, right. Nothing. So, and that's fine. It was a Space Act agreement, is an opportunity, all that equipment. So we started working on building this, it's 160,000 square foot facility I had to rent, but that's where the equipment was. Turns out I knew the owners, so that actually worked out well. Our connections in Brevard County were awesome. So we began this transition, and unfortunately things take a really long time. So as you can imagine, 160,000 square foot facility, it's like, is there really the business for it? There really wasn't. So by the time the Space Act agreement was done, we'd made this decision of, we need to transition to something that really, it's almost like a laser focus on what you can do, because it was very broad. That facility did everything, I think, except engines related to the shuttle. So we right-sized and went to a little bit smaller facility, 20,000 square feet, precision machining focus, cable harness focus, our engineering focus. And also at that same time, I had put in an unsolicited proposal to NASA to take over, well, I had two things going on. One, we had bid on through a company or an organization called Space Florida, we bid on the opportunity to build an external platform that would go on the outside of the International Space Station. It was a grant. And so we put in a response to that to say, hey, here's what we're proposing. This particular external platform is owned by another company, but what we were proposing is something we call EFTP, External Flight Test Platform. And it would allow other companies or agencies to test materials, electronics, cameras, anything they want out on the outside of the International.
It was like a patio.
Sort of, yeah, exactly. And it would go out on the outside, and it would be out there for 15 weeks,
expose it
longer.
Yeah.
Yep, and bring it back in and send it back down. So it was a relationship with the International Space Station. We also I put in an unsolicited proposal with regard to a flight to another, I guess you call it a flight facility. It's called Cyclops. It's a satellite deployer that belonged to NASA, wasn't being used. It had been used in the past, very successful, but it belonged to NASA. And I said, hey, essentially, we think that we could take that over. In the same vein as like a Space Act agreement, we can take that over. We can use it for commercial efforts. We can, but then also for government, and we'll maintain it and take care of it and be the owners of it. And so it allows for in-space deployment of satellites off the International Space Station. So all of this kind of happened around 2016, 2017, right-size the manufacturing, move things around, look at what we're doing up on the International Space Station. And the manufacturing facility was doing business. We were doing all kinds of space hardware, flight certified hardware, ground hardware, everything for all the different programs. I think at this point, we've almost supported every single program that's out there related to space, commercial and government, whether it's.
And these are highly customized, maybe one or two off things you're making, right?
That's exactly what they are. Yes. Yeah. So it's a lot. The paperwork, is this high, it takes longer than actually building the part sometimes, but we're a government contractor. We get it. That's what we do. We're all about the quality, all about safety, those kinds of things. So this, I had sort of morphed and pivoted to become more of a hardware focused space company. And, all of this is just, it's not making the stuff up as you go, but it's taking advantage of the situation, reassessing, let's follow, because everything's changing. And as you started this by saying commercial space, that pivot took longer probably than most expected, but it happened and it's happening. And lucky for us, we've been doing this now since, I've been in business since 99, but space stuff since 2008 or 6.
Yeah. And success builds on itself. And so you have this network of people working for you, and they're like, oh, they want to have Oculus system with the optics and laser, blah blah. Do you know any laser guys? And you could go probably to your team now and say, do you know any laser guys? And then they might say, well, I know somebody who would know, right? Like you've built up a network that's kind of its own success, isn't it?
Absolutely, you're exactly right. So whether it's people that are on other contracts with Craig Technologies, or it's just the connections, it's like, yeah, we have so many people that you can go out there and I know I drive my team crazy because I just keep saying it's not rocket science. We can find stuff. It's all right. They're out there. We'll find them. Don't worry about that. So yeah, it's just through the connections, and that allows you. An interesting way to say it, build on the success. We just continue that. So we sort of are, we were already ahead of the game, and this is how I kind of transitioned into Sidus Space. So a little bit backing up again on the manufacturing, back in 2014, when the Craig Technologies Aerospace Solutions was our manufacturing division. It was a division, and then we converted into an actual LLC, wholly owned subsidiary of Craig, because it made more sense, to have from a liability perspective. It was very different than services. So I have what we called CTAS, and that was the manufacturing division. So we morph into this more commercial space focused manufacturing. We do have other DoD customers and things, and it was, there was this vision. I think everyone could kind of see that we need to do something a little bit different. And it was just in the last couple of years where I kind of realized, wait a minute, we're manufacturing hardware, we're building satellite parts, we understand deploying off the IS set, we do all these things. And if I step back and pull them together, I'm like, well, gosh, we're already we have the makings of a satellite operations company, a satellite manufacturing company, all of that in space as a service, some of the terms that people are using now. And well, I'm already there, and we already have all the CapEx, the manufacturing's up and going. So I'm like, you know what? Let's do this, let's take advantage of this and get out there and provide a service that's just a little bit different from what we've done, but not really. And we've got so much experience, and hopefully we can give customers, a little bit better offering than maybe we would have in the past, or maybe others might. So we renamed Craig Technologies Aerospace Solutions Sidus Space, SIDUS Space, and separated it from Craig Technologies by making it a corporation. It's real standalone. It stood alone anyway, but it's truly a corporation, which is kind of a different type of a structure. And
like an S corporation?
Actually a C corporation.
A C corporation.
S corporation is what Craig Technologies is. It's C corporation. So Craig Technologies is first. It was the parent company, and sort of still is, but not really. And that's the S corporation. And then now Sidus Space is the C corporation. And Sidus Space is the one that, people go and look at the website, see where that space is a service. It just basically took everything that we've been doing for all these years and packaged it a little bit more clearly to provide service to customers.
Now, who would you say now is the customer for Sidus? Who would you say? And it's probably a lot of different things. Yeah. Who would you say? Who's your typical kind of like generic customer?
Well, we're still doing manufacturing, so it's still the large companies or small companies that have space hardware that they want manufactured, precision machining. They want it, we do assembly as well, cable harness, all those kinds of things. But the Sidus Space has a couple other areas of focus that our customers would be we're building a 3D satellite. We call it LizzieSat, because my biological name is Lizzie Sanchez. So I wanted something else named after me. But so we're building this satellite, and we've been approved. We've published filing for a satellite constellation by the ITU for 100 satellites. So our plan is to launch 100 satellite constellation using these 3D satellites, which allows, and this is getting to where the customers are, it allows other companies to integrate their technologies into our satellite to get them flight tested, because that's ultimately
you're creating orbital real estate.
Yeah, essentially it's an on-orbit testing platform. Some people have called it like a condo timeshare type of thing, but it's more than that, because we're just saying, hey, hand us your technology. We've been doing this for 20 years. Hand us your technology. We know how to get it up there. We know how to do everything related to it. Get it tested. Send you data, and then go, here you go. It's flight tested. So that's
they don't come back down, do they?
They don't, but the data does. So they can.
The data does.
The data does. Right. So whatever data they want to capture. And so you can think a satellite has multiple subsystems. You could have someone who wants to test propulsion. They want to test software. They want to test optics. They want to test whatever it might be, anything that they can pull that data back down, and then they can see that it worked or that it didn't work. And then they can, do that. So that's one vertical. So when you think about the customer base, it's still all the large prime contractors. It's still government. It's still that, but it's also smaller companies that have something they want to sell and they want to be a part of space. And so they're our customers as well.
So it comes down to price. And I know we can't talk too much about Citus because you're in a dark period because you filed your FCC documentation.
The
right?
SEC, actually, yeah, we did file, and that's,
Mhm.
so we've
Right.
filed our confidential S1, and we're in a dark period, so we can't discuss a whole lot. I mean, we can talk about what
Right.
Side of Space has done and does, but not the IPO.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. I listen to these podcasts, because of the whole Elon Musk thing. There's lots of podcasts now about space. I've never seen, you and I grew up in the Gemini Apollo era, right? And, but I don't remember ever hearing about Max Q and Delta V. They didn't get technical like they do now. And it's like, there's a popularization of pretty much technical engineering terms that everyone's talking about, which is great. But there's also this idea that goes back to the era of the trains and the boats and the planes of, you would think like, oh, no one thinks now like, well, it's much cheaper to fly if somewhere if you just get rent, you just hire your own Piper Cub or Learjet and just go. Wouldn't that be the cheapest way to go? Instead of going on a big jet, that sounds very expensive. But we know because of physics, right, that the big, long, huge boats always prevailed in terms of physics of getting cargo, right? And the big plane prevails. And now with Elon Musk coming up with this giant rocket and maybe Blue Origin coming up with these giant rockets, aren't they just going to guzzle these small, lean little companies with their small little satellite launchers?
I don't think so.
No?
I still think there's enough space for everyone, right? That's like cliche.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that small companies are still pretty agile. I think
Mm-hmm.
that big companies are innovative, and commercial companies are a little different. When you're public, you're private, all that comes into it. But I don't think so. I think that there is room for everybody if they do it right. And it's not just cost, it's reliability, it's the quality, those kinds of things. I think you're just going to see that there's just going to be more and more out there, that there's more opportunity out there. And if people are going to start realizing it, that, wow, we can do everything we do terrestrial, we should be able to do in space. And that's what, like satellites, our satellites that we're going to launch, in addition to testing, we're going to pull down data that we sell back to our customers. And there are already companies that are doing that. There's not too many of them. But pretty soon, like I said, people are going to realize, like, yeah, there's no reason that we can't do up there what we're doing down here. Again, to your point, though, I think that there's room for everybody to play. Small, big, medium, just like we're doing now, government contractor, whoever else. I mean, you've got all sizes of companies.
Well, even in aviation, I mean, you have small Learjets, and they haven't gone away,
Absolutely,
right? So
exactly.
obviously,
same thing. Yeah, it's absolutely. The price is going to change. They've got a different
Mhm.
mission. I mean, it's crazy. The opportunity. This is where I get all like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's enough room for everybody. The word competimates. Somebody had talked to me about that before. I'm like, that's perfect, because we're all competimates. Because we're competing maybe for some of the same customers, but like the total addressable market is absolutely ridiculous. And so,
right.
opportunity.
And as you know, going back to liberal arts education and a lot of what business isn't about. I mean, obviously, you're in the business of you're dealing with physics, right? You're always confronting physics with your the tolerances you have to deal with, the safety, the risk, and then you're going into space. So the rigors of engineering, you're always dealing with physics. But as you know, you have to paint a picture for people to say, space is something that would be really great for your company. It's the great new West. There's so much money to be made and opportunity to be had, because I think a lot of people don't have the imagination to see it easily. That, like, why the hell would my real estate company have any interest in space? Like, really? Do you know how much detail we can get, and with AI, we can find perfect locations, from space, where you could invest it, whatever it is, right?
Right.
So do you find that a lot of that's trying to market space?
Yes, and I'd like you to come work for me, because that's exactly right. That's what you're telling your customers, and even the non-traditional customers. I mean, like, picks anybody out there, and you can come up with a use case and a way that space can help them. And so but that's sales in general, right? You're always,
right.
You want to find out what their need is. You don't want to just sell them this widget that they never really thought about and they don't want it. You want to go, okay, you tell me what your challenge is and what your needs are, and then we're going to help you see how we can provide a solution it should be cheaper, it should be more accurate, like I said, reliable. There needs to be a benefit, not just, oh, it's cool to have something up in space, but I think that's exactly what our challenge is. And I don't know that it's that much of a challenge, because like you said, the momentum of what's happening when people are recognizing it, and it's thanks to SpaceX and Blue Origin and a lot of these commercial companies that are out there, getting the word out and saying, look at what Virgin, look at all those guys, look what we're doing. I think it's going to get easier and easier to convince your customers and the overall public about what opportunity there is in space.
Right, right, and reputation too. I mean, you have a long track record now of working with major players. I think people would see it as a risky thing, to put something in space. It's a lot of money, right? So if you have all this experience and this pool of talent, I would think that would help you too. Again, success building on success.
Yeah, right. It doesn't need to be a lot of money. I'm all about the taglines. We trademark everything, I swear. But our tagline was bringing space down to Earth, which sounds corny, but it kind of goes in line with me always going, it's not rocket science. We're bringing space down to Earth. Like you can do what you think is unattainable. You think it's too expensive. You think I can't do that. It's not the case. There's always a solution. And that's the engineer in me of like, and I drive my engineers crazy sometimes, it's like, all right, I know you can do this. They're like, look, I'm like, believe me, there is a solution. If I gave you money, if I gave you resources, if I gave you whatever, can you find a solution? And so there is always a solution. There is a solution to making space affordable to anybody who wants it.
And there's again, you're fighting physics and money. And if you can get like for instance, if I can get this into space, right? And you say, well, it's going to cost you, $500,000 or $250,000 to get that into space, whatever. I'm just giving you a round figure, right? And you can say, yeah, but there's also the engineering to make this, maximize its utility. Like maybe you could be a subcontractor. You could what do you call it when you lease out your own apartment? Like basically,
sublet. You could sublet.
You could sublet it, right? And we could put 50 experiments in that cylinder.
That's right. That's exactly.
So so there's getting it into space, the brute force of launching 1,000 of these guys on a Boeing rocket or whatever. But then there's the thing about how can we engineer the shit out of this cylinder to get lots of happy people, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably what you're doing.
And that's what we're doing. And so that's what the on-orbit testing we're doing. But then at the same time, I'm also up there pulling down my own data. I own everything. So you're right. I am maximizing this platform so that more people can have an opportunity. And again, this is not something that's a brand new idea. I'm not the pioneer doing this, right? We've been in this business for the last, how many years? I lose track of time as you get older, you forget, it goes faster. But I'm not the only one doing it. But we might be doing it a little bit different. We might be doing it with different experience. I mean, this thing, you're going to see more and more of what you're talking about, pop up with other companies. So it's a great opportunity. Yeah. Time is now.
Well, time is now. I wish you so much luck. And I want to talk to you again after your company goes public.
Okay. I appreciate that when we
then we can talk.
Exactly.
No more gag rules, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we have our own business to run. I hear people outside my door saying, getting nervous. So I'm going to go, but, thank you so much for joining me today on Thinking with Mike.
Mike, it was my pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, when do you go public? When does this happen?
We can't say. It's that whole
can't say.
Right. Exactly. Like I said, we just filed the confidential one. So.
Right. Well, I wish you luck and, we'll talk soon. Okay, Carol?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Carol. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.